The glass walls of Ethan Cole's condo opened onto Seattle's restless night. Rain streaking the panes, ferries drifting across Puget Sound like slow-moving stars. At 41, CEO of HarborTech, Ethan had the kind of success others envied. Magazine covers, investors calling, a company doubling in value. Yet when the city went quiet, his apartment felt cavernous, stripped of warmth. 6 months had passed since the divorce. Still, the faint trace of Jenna lingered. The lavender diffuser she once loved, her laughter caught in memory. He had thought freedom might feel like release, but instead it left him standing alone at 2 a.m., listening to the hum of the refrigerator. Work filled his days, but not the silence. Every deal closed tasted like ash. In the glass reflection he saw a powerful man, admired and envied, but behind the eyes was only the void. Lily Brooks moved quickly through the glass lobby of HarborTech, her heels muted against the polished stone. At 28, she had the sharp precision of someone who had learned to outpace doubt. The quick mind, the tidy reports, the numbers always balanced. To most of her colleagues, she was the kind of analyst every company wanted. Efficient, reliable, steady under pressure. But under the fluorescent light, her skin looked pale. Her movements carried a fragility no one noticed, or pretended not to. She avoided the cafeteria, ducked away from casual conversations, left meetings the moment they ended. To Ethan she was invisible now, though once, not long ago, she hadn't been. They had shared something brief but genuine. A romance that had unfolded in stolen hours and quiet confessions. For Lily, it had felt like sunlight after a long winter. But when Jenna discovered them, everything collapsed. The divorce was brutal, the gossip merciless. Lily had withdrawn, claiming it was nothing, a mistake. Yet 12 weeks later, she carried the secret in her body. Her mother's illness made silence inevitable. Multiple sclerosis treatments cost more than Lily could ever afford alone. Her job's insurance kept the medicine flowing, kept her mother walking, kept the fragile world from falling apart. If HarborTech let her go, everything would collapse. And so Lily hid the nausea behind polite smiles, disguised the fatigue with makeup, pressed her trembling hands flat against conference tables until the shaking stopped. At night, in her small apartment south of the city, she pressed her palm to her abdomen and whispered promises she wasn't sure she could keep. She remembered Ethan's hand once covering hers, steady and certain, and the way he had spoken of children. A dream he had abandoned after doctors told him the odds were nearly impossible. She had wanted to tell him, still wanted to, but fear outweighed longing. In the office corridors, she avoided his gaze. If their eyes met, she looked away first. Rumors already swirled. About Ethan, about the divorce, about her. Every whisper felt like a noose tightening. Lily walked a line so thin it felt like glass. One misstep, and her mother's treatment would vanish. Her career would shatter, and Ethan would know the truth she had sworn to bury. Jenna Cole never raised her voice. She didn't have to. Her power was quieter, sharper. The kind that arrived in a perfectly folded note slipped under a door, or a message delivered by someone else's lips. When she appeared in Lily's path one rainy Thursday evening, it was with the same composure she once used at galas and charity dinners. The parking garage echoed with the sound of tires and dripping pipes, but Jenna's heels were precise, unhurried. Lily froze, clutching her bag a little tighter. "Lily," Jenna said, as if they were still acquaintances who exchanged polite smiles. Her dark hair was pinned back, her lips painted in the same crimson Lily remembered from glossy magazine spreads. "I don't want any trouble," Lily murmured. "Oh, sweetheart," Jenna replied, stepping closer. "Trouble isn't what I'm here for. I'm here with clarity." She held out a slim folder. The paper inside was pale against the shadows of the garage. Lily's breath caught before she even touched it. Medical records. Her name at the top, her pregnancy noted in sterile language. She hadn't told anyone, not even her closest friend. "I don't know how you—" Jenna cut her off with a raised hand. "Connections. You'd be surprised how eager people are to talk when they think they're helping me." Lily's heart pounded so loudly it drowned the hum of the fluorescent lights. "You're terrified, aren't you?" Jenna's tone softened, almost tender. "And you should be. Your mother's care depends on Harbortech's insurance. A single misstep and those treatments disappear. You know what that would mean for her." Lily's throat closed. "So here's what you'll do." Jenna leaned in, her perfume sharp, suffocating. "If anyone ever asks, this child isn't Ethan's. Deny it, distance yourself, and he'll believe you eventually. And in return, your mother continues receiving her medication. Simple." Lily's hand trembled around the folder. She wanted to throw it back, to scream, to run. But the image of her mother struggling to walk across the living room floor silenced her. Jenna tilted her head, watching her like a cat watches a cornered bird. "You don't have to like me. You just have to remember who holds the strings." When Jenna finally turned and walked toward her waiting car, her heels clicked with quiet victory. The taillights vanished into the rain, leaving Lily alone in the dim garage, her chest heaving, the folder pressed tight against her ribs. That night she sat in the dark of her apartment, her mother asleep in the next room, the folder lying unopened on the table. She whispered again to the life growing inside her. Not words of hope this time, but of apology. Mark Hale had perfected the art of smiling in other men's shadows. At 52, with silver haircut to corporate precision, he was the sort of board member journalists called seasoned. Inside Harbortech's towers, though, people whispered other words: patient, calculating, dangerous. Ethan had once admired him, even leaned on his connections in the company's early years. But lately, every glance from Hale felt like the glint of a knife half hidden. The whispers began quietly. A journalist from the Seattle Ledger called the communications office, asking about an office romance. A shareholder forwarded an anonymous email, wondering if Harbortech's culture was as ethical as its mission statement. At first, Ethan dismissed it as noise. Then came the photos, grainy, half-lit shots of him and Lily leaving the same conference hall months ago. Nothing explicit, yet suggestive enough to spark rumors. The board buzzed. Hale did nothing to stop it. In fact, he fanned the fire with subtle, well-placed comments. "Optics matter," he told a colleague in the break room, voice just loud enough to carry. "If our CEO is distracted, how can we trust him with the acquisition?" It was a strategic move. Harbortech was on the brink of its largest deal yet, a merger that would triple its reach in cloud infrastructure. Stock prices were climbing. But if scandal broke, if Ethan's credibility wavered, the deal could crumble. Shares would plummet. And men like Hale, with quiet agreements already inked, would be waiting to buy at pennies and emerge stronger. For Ethan, the attacks cut deeper than business. The gossip about Lily reopened wounds he thought he'd buried. He still remembered her laughter, the soft way she leaned against him in those stolen evenings, before the world turned hostile. Now every whispered headline dragged her name back into light she hadn't asked for. He confronted Hale once in the boardroom, after a meeting had ended and the others drifted out. The rain streaked across the tall windows, blurring the skyline. "You're behind this," Ethan said, voice low, steady. Hale adjusted his cufflinks with infuriating calm. "Behind what?" "The rumors. The leaks. Don't play games." A faint smile curved Hale's mouth. "Perception is reality, Ethan. And right now, perception doesn't favor you." Ethan stepped closer, his jaw tight. "You think you can gut this company for your own profit?" Hale met his gaze without flinching. "I think you've grown careless. Success makes men sloppy. You built HarborTech well, but even strong houses collapse when the foundation cracks. Jenna knew that. So do I." The mention of Jenna was deliberate. A knife turned slow. Ethan's fists clenched, but he forced himself still. When Hale walked out, the silence left behind felt heavier than the storm pressing against the glass. Ethan stood alone in the boardroom, watching the city blur into rain. For the first time, he felt the full weight of enemies both inside and outside his walls. HarborTech was no longer just his company. It was a battlefield, and somewhere in that war, Lily, fragile, exhausted, hiding her truth, had become another pawn. The morning began like any other, too early, too gray. Ethan arrived at HarborTech before most of his staff, the sound of his shoes echoing against the marble lobby, his coffee untouched in his hand. He liked the emptiness of the office before it filled with voices, as if for a few brief minutes the company still belonged entirely to him. His assistant had stacked the day's mail neatly on his desk. Contracts to review, shareholder letters, the usual noise. But among them lay a small sealed envelope, its label smudged, addressed not to him but to L. Brooks. A clerical error, most likely. Ethan meant to set it aside, but his eye caught the medical insignia in the corner. A clinic he recognized from Seattle General. He froze. For a long time he didn't move, didn't breathe. His fingers hovered, then closed around the envelope before he could think better of it. He told himself he would deliver it unopened, that it wasn't his place. But something inside him, a quiet, insistent dread, made him break the seal. Inside lay a thin report. The words blurred at first, his vision tightening. Gestational age 11 weeks. Findings: twin pregnancy. Maternal status: stable. Beneath it, the faint black and white image of an ultrasound. Two small forms, side by side, suspended in shadow. Ethan's breath caught. His hand trembled as he traced the outline of the page. The dates aligned exactly with the time he and Lily had been together. Too exact to deny. He sat heavily in his chair, the paper crumpling slightly in his grip. The office around him disappeared. The hum of the city below went silent. All he saw were those two tiny shapes, fragile and undeniable. For years, doctors had told him fatherhood was impossible. Less than 1% chance, they had said, offering statistics like condolences. He had accepted it with the cold pragmatism of a man who always calculated risks, who learned to shut the door on dreams. Children, he told himself, were for other men, not for him. But here it was. Proof. Life he had never dared imagine. And Lily had known. She had carried this alone, her silence wrapped in exhaustion and fear. He thought of her pale face in the corridors, the way she avoided his eyes, the weight in her voice when she insisted they had nothing between them. Now he understood. The betrayal cut deep, but deeper still was the realization of why. Jenna. The threats, the cruelty, the way she always struck where it hurt most. It wasn't just spite, it was calculated destruction. And Lily, trapped between love and survival, had chosen silence. Ethan pressed the ultrasound flat on his desk and lowered his head into his hands. For the first time in years, the tears came without resistance. They weren't loud or violent, just steady, like rain against glass. He thought of what he might have said if he'd known, of how he might have protected her, protected them. Instead, he had been blind, consumed with work, with anger, with his own hollow victories. When he finally lifted his head, the city beyond the windows seemed sharper, crueler. The skyline cut like knives against the pale sky. In his chest, something broke open. Not weakness, but a fierce, aching resolve. For Lily, for the children she carried, for the truth Jenna had twisted into silence. The board could circle like vultures. Jenna could spread her poison. But Ethan knew now what he was fighting for. Not just harbor tech, not just reputation, but blood, breath, and the impossible miracle he had once been told would never come. He folded the report carefully, sliding it into his briefcase as if it were something sacred. Then he stood, his face still wet, but his shoulders straighter than they had been in months. The war was no longer abstract. It had a face. 2 of them. The boardroom smelled faintly of cedar and coffee, the long glass table polished to a gleam. Outside, Seattle's skyline blurred with rain, the sound hidden in gray mist. 12 directors sat in their high-backed chairs, their expressions cautious, expectant. At the head, Ethan Cole adjusted his cufflinks with deliberate calm. He had called the emergency meeting himself, a move that had already raised eyebrows. Normally he avoided drama, preferring precision. But today silence would mean surrender. "Thank you for coming," Ethan began, his voice steady though his pulse hammered. "We need to address matters that threaten not just my leadership, but HarborTech itself." Mark Hale sat 2 seats down, posture relaxed, lips curved in his usual faint smile. Jenna occupied a chair near the window, her presence an intrusion. She had no place here, yet Hale had maneuvered her in as an advisor. Her eyes glinted with satisfaction, like someone waiting for the executioner's blade to fall. Ethan laid a thin folder on the table. The sound was quiet but commanding. "For weeks, there have been rumors, whispers of impropriety, questions about this company's integrity. You've all seen them." A few board members shifted uncomfortably. "What you haven't seen," Ethan continued, sliding documents across the table, "is the truth. An employee, a young analyst, was threatened. Her private medical records were obtained illegally. Her mother's treatments were held over her as leverage. And those threats came from someone in this room." The air seemed to thicken. Hale's smile faltered by a fraction. Jenna tilted her head, unbothered. One director frowned at the paper before him. "This is testimony?" "From an insurance worker who processed the threats," Ethan confirmed. "Signed, notarized, and more." He opened his briefcase, drawing out the sealed envelope. His hands didn't tremble this time. "This was mistakenly routed to my desk. A medical report. Confirmed not scandal but life. 2 children. Mine." He placed the ultrasound gently on the glass, as if it were a weapon sharper than steel. Silence swallowed the room. A few directors leaned forward, their expressions shifting, confusion, then recognition, then something like sympathy. Finally, Ethan turned to Jenna. "You told her to deny me. You said if she spoke the truth, her mother's care would disappear. You used illness as blackmail. And you," he turned to Hale, voice harder now, "spread rumors to the press, hoping to break our stock before the merger. Hale's mask cracked. These are wild accusations, he snapped, though his voice lacked its usual polish. They're documented facts, Ethan shot back. And if this board values HarborTech, it will see them for what they are. For a moment, the only sound was the rain ticking against the windows. Then Lily's voice cut through the quiet, trembling but clear. It's true. All heads turned. She had entered silently at Ethan's request, but now every eye was on her. Pale, hands clasped tight, she stood near the door like someone bracing for impact. Jenna threatened me, Lily said, her voice breaking but steadying again. She said if I admitted Ethan was the father, my mother's treatments would be cut. I thought I was protecting her. I thought I had no choice. Her eyes flicked to Ethan, then away, tears glistening. I'm sorry. The board erupted in murmurs. Some directors exchanged sharp looks. Others shook their heads. The narrative Hale had spun, the distracted CEO, the reckless affair, cracked open in front of them. Ethan raised a hand, silencing the room. The issue isn't my personal life. It's leadership, integrity. HarborTech cannot afford directors who exploit employees for leverage. His gaze pinned Hale. Resign, today, or face public exposure. Hale's jaw clenched. For once, no smile. After a long, taut silence, he gathered his papers and rose. Without a word, he walked out. Jenna lingered, her crimson lips curved in defiance. You think this is over? She murmured. Ethan didn't flinch. It is for you. Her heels struck the floor like gunshots as she stormed out, the door slamming behind her. The rain outside eased, the sound reappearing faintly through the mist. Ethan sat back, exhausted but unbroken. Lily remained near the door, her shoulders trembling, but in her eyes was something new, relief, fragile but real. The tide had turned. The storm inside HarborTech faded with time. Hale's resignation was framed as personal. Jenna's fury dissolved without allies, and the company steadied itself. Ethan introduced a quiet new policy shielding employees from retaliation over private matters. He never said Lily's name, but everyone knew. For Lily, relief came in fragments. Her mother's treatments continued. Her position remained secure, and the silence of fear slowly loosened. At night she would sit with her mother, tea in hand, and feel something unfamiliar. Safety. Ethan too shifted. His condo no longer smelled of lavender. He had finally thrown the diffuser away. The emptiness that once pressed on him softened, replaced by the thought of voices that weren't his own filling the rooms. Months later, under a pale sky on Bainbridge Island, Ethan and Lily were married quietly, with only a few close witnesses. No cameras, no spectacle. Just the sound of water and the hush of vows spoken like promises carried too long. By late summer, their twins arrived, impossibly real, impossibly his. Ethan would wake before dawn to hold them, listening to their fragile breaths as the first light spilled through the nursery window. For a man told fatherhood was nearly impossible. Each sound was a miracle. Sometimes he and Lily walked by the shoreline, the city skyline glowing faintly across the water. They spoke less of what had nearly broken them, more of what was beginning. Laughter returning, small hands grasping theirs, the quiet rhythm of family. Seattle remained the same, gray skies, restless rain, neon mist over the sound. But for Ethan and Lily, it no longer felt like emptiness. Felt like home.